There's currently a single proposal that is tearing the Terra Luna Classic community apart. Let's go over what this proposal says and why there's so much drama around this proposal. For anyone who doesn't know, this proposal was put forward by Alex Forshaw, ex-Terra Rebels member, and this is where some of the drama first begins. This proposal talks about the plan to recover and use $4.16 million of non-Terra assets. Of course, with that amount of money, there's a lot of dispute that comes up of how that money should be utilized and who should control it. The general idea here is to use those assets to fund professional blockchain development with some community oversight. There's currently a multi-sig wallet with 6 different people on that wallet. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, that means that out of 6, you'd need 4 people to sign. You'd need a majority of signatures to sign for anything to transact from that wallet. Now, this happened before the collapse, and so these signatories are no longer a part of the Terra Luna Classic community. And so the first step here is to replace those 6 with 6 people who are relevant in the community. This would include very familiar names such as Ed, Tobias, and Alex, the person who put forward this proposal. They would then immediately extend this multi-sig wallet to include 3 additional members to strengthen the independence and community participation. The most notable one here being Coach Bruce from LUNC DAO. This would make the wallet now a 5 of 9, or essentially needing 5 people to agree to any transaction for something to happen on this wallet. So 5 out of 9 people need to agree for any transaction to occur. And each of these 9 people would receive $5,000 per month for fulfilling the duties. Now, people tend to forget and not read the rest of this paragraph, which is critical because this explains what those duties are. So these signers would be obligated to help and create a 12-month community-driven Terra Luna Classic development roadmap, solicit bids to execute on pieces of that said roadmap, evaluating the qualifications and track records of those bidders, voting on the finalists, and monitoring their progress to completion. So essentially, to summarize it, they're going to help the community create a 12-month roadmap. They're then going to take people in to bid on different works or aspects of that 12-month roadmap. Then they're going to oversee the work that's being done over however long it takes for each of those different aspects. Some things might be simple. They might only take a month of oversight, and other things might take 6 months to a year of oversight for completion. And so throughout this entire time period, they're going to be approving at the beginning who gets to do the work. They're going to be giving funding as the people go through the work, and they're going to be overseeing the work throughout this whole time period. So essentially a project management oversight role. This is not $5,000 a month to simply sign off on a wallet transaction. There's a lot more that goes on here behind that people are missing. So if somebody fails to do their duties here, the current people on the signature wallet, the other 8 people or whatever it is, they're going to then work with the community to replace that individual who is a problem. Something else that a lot of people are missing is the community transparency aspect of this. So all work proposals to the multi-sig wallet must be made public along with the votes of the multi-sig. So for example, here, let's back up. We obviously have a couple developers on this multi-sig wallet, Tobias being one of them, for example. Let's say, and I don't think Tobias would do this, I genuinely think he's a good person. Let's say Tobias wanted to submit a work proposal, but he bid 5 times what it would actually cost because he wanted to make a lot of money. Let's say he was doing that out of greed, right? That information would be made public. And if anybody else bid against him, we would then be able to see, hey, Tobias put out a proposal for $100,000. Someone else put a work bid saying that they could do it for $20,000. And then we could also see that, hey, Tobias voted for himself and got these other people to vote for him, even though this other option was so much better for the community overall. And so this transparency allows us to help hold these people accountable and make sure that they're not doing favoritism, nepotism, or any of those particular issues that could arise. Now it says right here, signers are free to submit their own bids, like I just said, and they're expected to recuse themselves. However, as I mentioned, those votes would be made public. So if they don't do what they're expected to do, that would probably be grounds of termination from this multi-sig wallet, and they'd be gone. The other key thing here is that this would only fund layer 1, or basically blockchain development, maintenance, and upgrades. So we're not talking about funding dApps and other utilities that come on the ecosystem. This is purely the infrastructure that's being funded. Also, any USTC that becomes available in lending pools will be extracted and burned on chain. So there is some USTC that's stuck on other things right now. If we are able to get access to that, we're going to burn it, which is, I think, a great thing to start off. Now, these multi-sig owners provide a summary of itemized expenses to the community, including all relevant on-chain transactions, approximately 1 time per month. So again, accountability. As they're doing distributions, as work's being done, we're going to see that information. We're going to see the expenses. We're going to see all this information. One of the last key points here is that if the community agrees upon a more sustainable governance framework for handling this, and they want to take it over, this will be returned to the community's possession. In this scenario where the community take over, the multi-sig owners will relinquish their salaries, compensation, and associated duties of oversight, budgeting, and layer 1 development management. Like I said, essentially project management and budget managing. And so there is some framework here that we're going to criticize in a second here, but there is some framework here for the community's feedback and community to actually take this over if need be. And one of the last key points that we're going to read off here is that beyond the proposed salaries, the community commits to fund the legal defenses of any individuals on the multi-sig for any Terra Luna Classic related litigations that they may face. Now, this particular thing is upsetting a lot of people, saying if they do something bad, we're going to have to fund this. But in reality, this is a fairly standard practice. If you're distributing money and there's some potential legal liabilities, we're dealing with international law. There's so many variables going on here. If something does arise where these people are pursued legally for whatever reason, they do get a defense. And that is fairly common, honestly. Now, one of my critiques of this is that there usually is a cap, and there should be a cap in here. There should be litigation insurance and a cap on how much can be spent to protect these different multi-sig holders. And so let's talk about this here for a second. A lot of the drama that you're going to hear on Twitter, on Discord, and a lot of these different forums is because people either are not reading this or they're coming at it with a totally different perspective than what I believe is fair. There are people who are saying, why are they getting paid $5,000 a month just to sign off on wallet transactions? As we covered, there's a lot of other responsibilities that come into play here. And I know it's a couple key bullet points, but overseeing projects for 6 months or a year at a time, that's not a 1 hour task, right? This is not $5,000 for 1 hour of work. That is a lot of work that goes into play to oversee these, provide funding, ensure they're meeting deadlines, all that stuff. That is a lot of work. And while technically maybe 1 or 2 people could do that, we are a decentralized network. And so we want to have accountability. We want to have a lot of people overseeing and a lot of people double checking the work to make sure there's nothing funky going on here. And that's why we need 9 people or a larger quantity of people. It doesn't have to be 9, but we need more people than what would otherwise technically be required. There are also people who criticize the $5,000 a month number, and to that I would just say simply consider a couple things. One, this is a specialized skill set. This is not anybody that you could throw into this position that could efficiently oversee these different projects and make sure things are being done accordingly. Even when drawing comparisons to other money management situations, it's important to also understand that this is not simply money managing. It's not simply throwing money into a cryptocurrency and letting it grow over time. There's active oversight that goes on here, and there's also a lot of hate that comes from the community. I mean, regardless of what you do, when you have this many people involved, you're going to receive hundreds of hate messages, and that has a price. Usually there's a toll that people pay. That comes from extra stress, that comes from anxiety, that comes from a lot of factors that are really hard to place a value on, but that makes a lot of people steer away from anything like this. That dramatically reduces the pool of people who'd be willing and capable to do this work. Now, a totally fair criticism that I actually agree with is that there is some accountability structured in here, but I don't believe it's clear enough. If somebody does do wrong, right, we get access to these transparent documents, the transparent votes, a lot of this information, but let's say something does go wrong here, there's not really a clear process as to how that's resolved. It says they're going to be voted off, but what does that mean? Do we do a governance vote and say, hey, we want to have Tobias removed because of my example earlier where he voted to give himself way more money than someone else bid? I think the transparency side is good. We're getting all this information, but the accountability, that's where we're lacking a little bit in this proposal. And that's what I'd like to see before this would have a yes vote from me. The last but arguably most critical thing to consider here, this money is currently held by 6 multi-sig holders. At the end of the day, they have control to determine what happens with this money. We can create an idea and propose it to them and say, here's what we'd like to have happen, but they have full power. They are not obligated to do what we want. They can do what they want. And so it seems like from what has been said that those people, those 6 people who currently control these $4 million, they want to pass it off to another council or another group of people to manage the funds. As mentioned quite a few times now, the community pool address is public. Anybody can send money to it. Anybody can interact with it. If they wanted to, they could just send the $4 million directly over there, but they're not doing that. They want someone from our community or a group of people from our community to take over this money, take over the responsibility of handling this money. They are not sending this directly to the community pool, and I think that's something that needs to be considered here. A lot of people are saying just send the money to the community pool. Well, 1, the people who hold the money are not doing that and they're not having that happen. But 2, most importantly, what happens when you do that? But the second thing to consider is when you do that transaction, you're going to have to go through a centralized exchange. There's going to be a record of that transaction. There's going to be potential tax implications. And even though maybe it's not going to be taxed, there's going to be dispute. When you're transacting $4 million, it is going to get flagged and there's going to be questions that are asked as far as taxes, as far as who owns the money. A lot of things are going to come up. Someone's going to have to deal with that. I would encourage you to think about some of these points that I brought up, and I respect whichever way you guys want to go on this proposal, right? It's a governance platform. We can vote and have different opinions. That's something amazing about it. But for the future of Terra Luna Classic, regardless of how you feel about this proposal, we need a set of developers. And if you guys want to understand why that's so critical, check out this video up here.